Well, it's our pleasure to tell you more about the Young Women's Initiative. It started with 8 women's foundations, and it was based on work that started in New York that Donna Oliveira will tell you about in a minute. But we have grown to 11 women's foundations, and it's gone viral, and we would love to tell you more about it so that you will consider catching this virus. Anna, will you please tell everyone, set the stage for us, how did the Young Women's Initiative come about?
Okay, first of all, thank you everybody for being here. I second Donna that, can see you are the resilient, courageous people. They're here. And let me just say, I think this is a fantastic conference, so I want to give kudos to WFN for organizing that and creating this opportunity for all of us. Much, much needed and really great. So many of us saw earlier today, Joanne Smith here sitting, I think, on this chair in a panel talking about girls of color, cis, trans, non-binary. I want to say that the Young Women's Initiative and the work that we have been doing on this exists because of the vision of Joanne. We are going back to the years of President Obama's administration and the activism happening by women of color, led by women of color to center girls and young women of color. And as very good centering and very good investments were happening with my brother's keepers. And at the time, Joanne moved from doing that at the national level to do that at the local level in New York. And I think that's so important because so many of the incredible speakers have talked today about, the complexity of being in philanthropy, the complexity of dealing with racism, of dealing with classism, of dealing with gender oppression. And our conversation and what Joanne offered us was a way to accelerate that, a way to create solutions in a faster way. I want to make one comment that is my private comment, which is that the level of inequalities and that we aim to eliminate, they are so deep, right? And they are so multi-centennial. We heard this morning 202 years Tanisha McHarris was talking about that, right? That we believe that philanthropy needs to act differently. If it acts the same way, it will not be able to generate, just will not be able to. So think of the opportunity to accelerate and behave in a intentional reparatory manner in philanthropy. So Joanne approached the New York Women's Foundation, organized city council, got a speaker of the city council who was a Latina at the time, and we created a partnership with philanthropy, led by community, led by her and other community leaders, but philanthropy behind, committing to support that, and the speaker and city government. When I say philanthropy, yes, the New York Women's Foundation has had a pivotal role. That's our job. We are a locally based, women's foundation. But we never acted alone. We had great partnerships with the Novo Foundation, and I want to give a shout out to the women at the Novo Foundation. Some of them are here, doing major other things in the world now, but at the time did a major thing, which was to partner with us and get other foundations to support. Fast forward, Young Women came up as a long planning process. Over 100 young women of color participated in that and came with a blueprint for action. let me be clear at the dimension of impact that that blueprint had. Among other things, it had, for instance, closing Rikers Island, which is an exceedingly abusive and damaging jail in New York City, among other things. So our role was to bring philanthropy to support that. Fast forward, other women's foundations saw that opportunity, resonated, and we have this unflinching commitment. This is 7, 8 years ago. This is not a passing thing. This is not like we're doing this because we got a grant for whatever amount of time. We're there together. This is about, there is nothing that we can change in the world, or there's no fulfilling of any of our Women's Foundation's missions. There's no fulfilling of any of our missions, however they are written, if we don't do this. So we began this. It was actually began as a small group, and not all of us had at the beginning the opportunity to do that, to enact on it. But some of us had the commitment to do that. And I want to emphasize that very much. You have to have the intention. You don't always have the means to do something right away, but if you don't have the intention, if you don't join the vision, you can't get there. Before I finish, I also just want to acknowledge that some of us are sitting here on this stage today, but we are part and we depend on our other colleagues, many more colleagues. Some of them are here. They were here with us in the beginning. They are here with us now. So if you wouldn't mind just raising your hands, if you've been implicated in this process of changing the world and investing in girls of color. I see Tamara, I see Jennifer. Who else is here today?
We see Mary.
Oh, Mary's right there from Texas. So, there you are.
From Minnesota.
Yes! So I just want to give you a sense that it's not this group of people here just doing things. We are part of a much bigger collective of people. So it took hold. In the last 2-3 years, we've been able, we got funding, a little bit of funding from national funders in the beginning, little bit, very little bit. It was very challenging to position. At that time, it wasn't as centered in philanthropy, funding girls and young women of color. And it was very difficult to get funding. But we know that in a collaborative, we can do together what we cannot do alone. And one of the things that we can do together that we cannot do alone as local and regional women's foundations is attract large national funders. We crossed a threshold, and we have been able to do that now. We'll talk more about that later, but that is an important thing for you to know, that it took years for us to be able to harness more resources that we cannot harness alone, because we are perceived as local, small, and things like that. But as a collaborative, as a national collaborative, is a much bigger entity. That it is not an independent 501c3, it's really a collaborative. Over the years, it has been administratively housed at different members of the collaborative at our foundations. But it's intentionally not an independent 501c3, and it's not anybody's project. I also wanted to say that because it's very important for us to maintain the collaboration amongst us.
Thank you, Anna. So, Cara, you are the national director. You've been on the job a little over a year. Folks in the audience who don't know about the Young Women's Initiative are probably wondering, okay, so what exactly is the nuts and bolts of the Young Women's Initiative? Can you share a little bit?
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Donna, and thank you, everyone who's here joining us today. I think while you're listening to us, you're going to hear us throw out the collaborative, YWI, YWAC, and I think it's really important for me to go ahead briefly and elaborate on what we mean with when we use those terms. So YWI, as you can see, would be the Young Women's Initiative. So what we're doing here on a local level, what we have is a team of women's foundations. We have 11 women's foundations. Currently, we're in Alabama, Boston, California, right here in Washington, D.C. We're also down in the South. We've got Texas, Memphis, Tennessee, and everywhere else you could think of just about. And what happens there with YWI, we take young women and we actually equip them with what philanthropy actually is, and that's a tool for social justice. So it's really important that in this room, we have a lot of women who agree with us and understand the importance of advocating for young women of color, gender-expansive youth, and particularly ensuring that their ideas are being funded and that their work is being funded, but that's not the case everywhere. And so it's really important that we equip these young women to, one, so that we're not the only people advocating for them. Because when we advocate, of course, we have their best interests at heart. However, we want to make sure that we're not speaking for them. So our approach is a led by and for approach, where we really do center the voices of the young women and girls of color. With that, what we do here, typically, we want to make sure that it's one thing for us to advocate, but it's another thing to have these young women and girls of color at the table. It's another thing for them to be able to receive the funding and be able to use the funding to support the issues that they've identified in their own communities and the solutions that they've also identified on their own. With that led by and for approach, we really do believe that the issues and the solutions come from the same communities. And so these young women need to be at the table. We equip them with there are three really major things that we want to make sure that they leave YWI programming with a solid understanding of. One of the first things is cross-sector partnership. So this is when these young women are able to make connections with NGOs, other philanthropists, with private government, with different members of government, and to be able to prioritize the issues that matter to them. Another big thing is equipping them with the skills to advocate for policy changes. So they're able to communicate with different members of local and state government, and again, ensure that the issues that matter to them are being prioritized. And then finally, a really big aspect of our programming is participatory grant making. So we really want to ensure that each local YWI is really pushing dollars directly into the communities. We're putting the choices, we're giving the young women the opportunities to choose who in the community can help better the community. And we're pushing those dollars right there into those specific communities, addressing the issues that the young women are experiencing and that they've identified themselves. And again, that leads to power and policy change in a way that's different than we've seen before. Something else that's very vital to the YWI program is a YWAC. So again, here we go with the Ys and the Ws, but a YWAC is a Young Women's Advisory Council. So this is where the work gets started on the ground. Locally, we typically have a group of around anywhere between 12 to 20 plus young women and girls of color. We can have them from ages 12 to 24. We've seen a lot of success with ages 16 to 24. And these young women, they gather regularly. They identify the issues that matter to them in their particular communities. Again, we have 11 different women's foundations currently, and the political landscape is different everywhere. So we may have a mental health initiative that's super important in an area where mental health resources are limited for young women and girls of color. Or we may have issues regarding reproductive rights. And of course, in different areas, those challenges would be a bit different. So these young women get together, they work together, they build, they have mentorship opportunities, professional development opportunities. But what they also are able to do is take these issues, they're able to identify them, and then they're able to create a policy plan and an action plan where they work together, again, with those cross-sector partnerships, with those government partnerships, and they're able to create a policy agenda and actually affect change in their communities. And so we've seen a lot of success. We have a success story here we're excited to share with you today. And that is really the crux of what YWI is. It breaks down into the smaller sections like the YWAC, but the overall goal is to center the voices of young women and girls of color and to really put the power of philanthropy in their hands. And so we've witnessed them grant local organizations and different local programming that specifically supports the issues that they have identified that matter to them, and they're able to fit into spaces where they're often overlooked. And so we've seen the impact of that, and we're gonna get a great chance to hear a little bit more about that today.
Great, thank you so much, Cara, and I think that it's really powerful what you mentioned about this idea of the young women. We're shifting the power of philanthropy by inviting the young women to first tell us what are, and when I say young women, we also include gender expansive folks, especially we are a collaborative, and so each organization works with a community partner who actually delivers the program, and so they recruit the young folks to be in this program. But one of the really powerful things that you alluded to, Cara, is that these young women are not only beneficiaries by being in this program, and they receive stipends for being in the program and learn civic engagement and the power of philanthropy, but particularly around the power of philanthropy, we invite them to decide who in the community should get a grant, and they decide that fully. Our board, for instance, in Western Mass, does not ratify their decisions. Their decisions are final. We send out a check to, a mental health resource provider, for instance, those kinds of things. So that's really powerful. And it's really shifted within our own organization how we do things. And I think that's the true power of this program, is that it not only shifts power to young people, but it shifts our own lens of how we are doing things as a fundraising foundation as well. So, we went from a majority of women, white women board to majority women of color board. We're majority women of color in our staff. All these things were really inspired by our participation and learning from our sisters in this Young Women's Collaborative. Now, I want to turn it over to Natanja, who is the CEO of the Boston Women's Fund, and they have just recently joined. And Natanja, would love to hear from you. What has your experience been in working with other youth-centered initiatives, and why were you attracted to bringing this kind of program to Boston?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Oh, I didn't know if my mic was on. You don't want me to have a mic yell for too long. It gets crazy. But thank you. And thank y'all for being here, honestly. So I started at the Boston Women's. So first of all, let me just back up, because you have to know my story in order to know why I'm so committed to YWI. When I grew up in everyone always laughs at this, but I grew up in a housing development that was saved literally by residents who set up tents because a highway was going to go through this lot. This lot became Villa Victoria, which is an incredibly beautiful testament to Puerto Rico. I grew up there, and obviously we faced many of the same issues that our young people are facing now. I ended up having a daughter at 15. And so a lot of the work that I do for young people is, I think, part of helping me heal what I didn't receive as a young person. I stumbled into philanthropy. I never thought that there was a place for philanthropy for someone like me, quite frankly. And so I was at a community foundation, and I remember I got a job there as an executive assistant, and I was walking through and I saw Villa Victoria on the walls, and I was like, this is bugged out. Like, this is crazy. Like, pictures of like people I knew, leaders that were in our community, but I never understood that philanthropy was actually a part of helping to make my community happen. And so that was like a pivotal moment for me where I was like, oh wow, we're doing unto communities and not with them. So that was a game changer for me. When I came to the Boston Women's Fund, it was real clear to me that in our history, we had a program called Young Sisters for Justice. And this program was nationally renowned. Young people were giving out money, they were meeting civic leaders. It was incredibly similar to YWI. And I feel like everything I do right now at the Boston Women is just a remix. I'm literally looking at the 90s and I'm like, we're just gonna bring that back, right? But I heard through colleagues, Donna, Anna, that they were part of a cohort. And for the first 2 years, y'all, I tried to do it on my own. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, we could do this. I was like, we could get 6 to 8 interns. They're gonna be here all summer. Lord of mercy, Lord of mercy. It was incredibly challenging, and it was probably the most rewarding work I have done. But I also learned that we are not youth development people. I am a philanthropist. And although they brought, the first cohort actually did a lot of work kind of breaking down the stigma between adults and young people. The second year, the cohort actually gave out $25,000 to one organization. It was incredibly hard for them. And the third year, which we're in now, is the YWI model, which is we found this incredible community leader, Jamila Gales, who has been doing youth work on her own. She has a full-time job, kind of after hours. And we were able to provide her with stipend, give her some infrastructure, and let her go. And of course, using kind of the model and having conversations about the curriculum was already very much aligned. And so I'm just a believer. There hasn't been many movements that have started without young people. And for me, in particular, in my own leadership, I need them around me because I know that I'm getting stale. And I know that when I have them near me, they're pushing me to think broader, to be more bold. So it's a deeper commitment at the Boston Women's Fund, as I think it is at all of our funds, quite frankly, to not just have a program or a collaborative, but to embed young people in philanthropy. Because the truth is that we have counted on their leadership, and we do believe that they can make the decisions. So that's just a little bit about how the Boston Women's Fund has evolved because of YWI.
Thank you, Natanja. And we had mentioned, great job. We had mentioned that really this program is transforming each of our foundations. And our foundations, one of the beautiful things about our collaborative is that we have foundations that are huge and we have foundations that are small and scrappy, like Western Mass and Boston. And so some of the foundations that are have been historically better resourced, like Minnesota and at least until now, the DC area Women's Foundation, they actually, inspired by the YWI concept, went kind of a step further and created a parallel program. I believe in Minnesota it was called the I Believe in You grants or Genius grants, and in DC, they're called Rockstar grants. And so we have with us, we're not just talking about youth, but we're centering them. So we're very lucky to have Taylor from right here in DC, who is a Rockstar grant recipient. And Taylor, we would love to hear what that experience has been about, what your project is about. Tell us.
Of course. So a little background on me. I'm from the area. I'm from Ward 8, Southeast DC. I attended Ballou High School. And growing up in Southeast, it's a lot going on. I mean, it's a lot going on with our youth. And of course, you know, how do I make a change? I wanted to make a change. That's always been my passion. You know, I've had a lot of friends pass away, you know, it's just the environment. But I want to make a change, and how do I make that change? The Young Women's Initiative helped me make that change. I was able the first thing I noticed was the application process. Application process, it was very thoughtful. Like, they didn't ask generic questions. They asked me really good questions that made me really, really think. And I was pondering on my application for a good 2 weeks before I actually sent it in, because I had to give them a whole plan. And I didn't really have that much guidance on it. So it was a long shot for me. I was like, I'm gonna just try. And I got it. I was so excited, I got it. And when I remember the first call, Chica, my grant advisor, she was so soft-spoken, but it was still all about me. Like, she made me feel like I had a voice, and I didn't think that I had an important voice. And she has, like, really made me feel like, no, Taylor, this is your brand, this is your empire, and really build it and put the time and energy in it, because it's worth it. Even the way she tickles my creative mindset. Like, she doesn't just sit there, well, what do you think? Or what do you want to do? She's gonna tickle it. Like, she's gonna just, I don't know. She's gonna really get me to thinking. I'm really passionate and sometimes self-conscious about the work that I do, because not a lot of people my age are trying to do it, and not a lot of us are in the room. So when I come in the room, I'm kind of nervous. And today even, she's helped me, like, got this, you got this. So working with her, I have began to start my own nonprofit, That Girl, peer mentorship organization. Become that girl today, because you're all that girl. But even coming here today, that helped me find my name, because I didn't know a name for my organization. Yes, that's a Today name.
Awesome.
Okay, it's on my name tag. It is a Today name. And coming here and being invited here by the Young Women's Initiative, I've learned a lot. I didn't know what philanthropy was today. But listening to everyone here, I've learned it. Like, even just in my sessions, I've been here since 10 a.m., I've learned, I got the idea. Like, I'm not an expert maybe, but I definitely have an idea. And the Young Women's Initiative have provided that to me. Hope you guys realize that you may be looking at the next president. I don't know.
Well,
but
listen, you were natural at that podium. You were a natural up there.
But I want you guys to know that you guys contributed to that with seeing everyone here and hearing your stories and hearing how passionate. And like the lady said earlier, it's gonna take time. It's gonna take time, but that's all we got is time. I mean, we got it, so why not use it?
Taylor, tell us a little bit.
Thank you so much. Anna, I want to ask you a little bit about, it's taken time. It's also taken a lot of energy. I feel like you're the queen of trying to get funding for our movement here. Tell us a little bit about the challenges and what you think the opportunities are for other foundations joining.
So the reason why we also wanted to share this with you is because we want to invite you to consider being part of this. Just wanted to say that. Donna, and Natanja, Kara, and now, of course, the living leadership that you're giving us, Tyler, is, women's foundations. We are very locally competent, right? We're close to people, we're close to the ground. If we're doing the right thing, we are the us, right? We're not the us, them. And we want to be significant, we want to evolve, and what this has provided for us is a system to do that, and to do that with the right values. The concept that problems and solutions live in the same place, and the concept that those who are solving those problems on a daily basis as a prerequisite for their existence is what this uplifts. Taylor is a living example of that. So what is the role of us as a women's foundation, and how do we do that? Our job is, we are not on a day-to-day basis in the lives of young women of color. Natanja just said, we are in philanthropy, but the expertise that lives in organizations by and for young women of color is what we partner with. So what we are doing is we are coming together. Each of us is a foundation. We come together. We're harnessing additional dollars that alone we couldn't harness. And we are distributing those dollars to local community partners who are themselves by and for young women of color. So what we are doing is accelerating money going to the hands of organizations by and for young women of color that create the auspicious environment in which somebody like Taylor, right, young women of color, exist, thrive. So this is not, we don't partner with organizations that are fixing young women of color. There's nothing to be fixed. There's nothing wrong. We are partnering with organizations that are by and for, that affirm, right? That create the environment that leverages. Nobody's empowering anybody because power is already there. We're just creating the auspicious. We funders fund those who create the auspicious environment. So we together there? So the collaborative, and what Donna is asking me is, how are we going about harnessing these dollars? That's our job. That's my job, right? We are in public foundations. We influence philanthropy, and we depend on other philanthropy at the same time, right? So we have been so lucky that there are incredible partners in philanthropy. Some of them here with us today, some of them earlier here with us today, and that see themselves are committed. They are people of color. They are committed to this shift that we're all trying to make. So they have been supporting this acceleration. So this is what happens, you know, when Natanja, the Boston area, just gonna do an example, or Donna, we are able to get a grant from a national funder and we distribute amongst ourselves. They have the ability, the New York Women's Foundation does too, we locally add to those other funds. You there with me? Because you show up in community and you say, I was able to leverage X amount of money to allow us to begin focusing on girls of color. We are, you know, what is it, a penny out of every, you know, $10 or something that goes for girls and young women of color is an immoral, unethical, unjust, beyond unjust, is immoral. So we are able to multiply those investments, yes? So that's the issue and one of the values of the collaborative. We want you, if you are in a Women's Foundation, we want you to consider this. This is a win for all of us. It's a win that does not have a losing thing for somebody. It's not a win-lose proposition that we're so used to in the world. It's a win-win proposition. So we work in, I think, I'm just gonna give the word that communities of practice, but that's what it is, you know. We have a CEO group that we meet regularly, we share our experiences, we problem solve together, and we share experiences on many levels, on how to get things done, how to hold on to our jobs, how to fundraise as women of color, how to deal with obstacles that we didn't expect, how do we actually transform organizations so they are closer. You know, we actually walk that talk. Women's foundations are usually a very good way for women of color to cis, trans, non-binary, to enter philanthropy, you know, because we're close to community, because we don't look at philanthropy as a professional career, we look at philanthropy as a transformational event, right? As a form of activism. So that's what we want you to consider. We also, the folks, the program officers, the directors, that run programs in each of our foundations get together, have their own communities of practice, share their own experiences, advance the kinds of initiatives that Donna and Natanja and Cara were talking about. You know, what are the innovations that Western Mass is doing that New York can learn from and consider expanding, you know? So we have had, I think, a return on investment, very, very high return on investment. Where have we been weak on? We have not invested enough, I think, in evaluation of our impact. We are about to do that. I think we have a little bit of funding that will allow us to do that so that we can continue to multiply the knowledge about it and attract other investments. And lastly is this whole, day-to-day, I've been so inspired by the clarity that has been shared here about the role of philanthropy, about that philanthropy is not an end to anything, that philanthropy is part of an enormous justice road transformation, right? And that we need to do that in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is not a fad, right? In a way that is not, okay, now, remember it was said earlier today, there's a particular extraordinary expression of violence, and then philanthropy runs there, right? When that extraordinary expression of violence kind of withers, the constant daily expressions of violence are ignored. We are not doing that. And how do we embed this in institutions, right? This needs to continue beyond any one of us in our women's foundations, right? This needs to be, our dream is that in every place in the US and beyond, but let's just say the US, that a young woman of color has a locally based organization in her community, their community, that will be there with them in that strengthening kind of place. That's our dream. We want to get there. And that is something that is not a perhaps we do it, perhaps we don't do it, but becomes embedded like libraries, you know what I mean? Like that, There are very few institutions that are positive institutions. They are usually, negative institutions. Libraries are positive institutions, right? So that's why I'm giving that example. So I just wanted to say that we want you to consider, and we want to be able to bring more resources to everybody to do that, I stand on the shoulder of giants. Giants in our communities, but also giants in the movement. I'm looking at Jeanette, and I am thinking about that. Because the work with young women of color, this is one particular way to do. This is a way that might be really attractive to women's foundations, but it's certainly not the only way. And we constantly look around at you and others, to figure out how we can best partner, grow, and be authentic. But that is a plea. Consider that. Cara is ready to talk with you.
Yeah, and I want to turn it over to Cara, and then we're going to open it up to your questions, because this is really about what questions you have. A couple of things I did want to hit on before that is that if you sign up for this, you don't have to create things yourselves. Joanne's in the room from Girls for Gender Equity. They gave us a brilliant curriculum. So that would be shared. So you would share that with your community partner. We have templates for an MOU for your community partner. All that kind of wisdom and knowledge is freely shared in the collaborative. And now I want to turn it over to Cara. Cara, before she came to us as the director of this collaborative, actually was on the community partner side. So do you have any sort of observations from being on both sides of this that you wanted to share before we open it up to questions?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Being on the community partner side was incredibly enlightening. It was interesting. Actually, I was with the Texas Women's Foundation. In Houston, we actually created the inaugural YWI for the Houston area. Dallas had been serviced for so long, there was so much funding going there, but there was a need in Houston as well. Being able to actually hear what the young women not only needed, but what they were willing to do, what they were willing to give up, the sacrifices they were willing to make, and the way they were willing to grow to improve their communities really inspired me. And it helped me understand that this is something that cannot stop. This is something that can't stop. Locally it's powerful, but as a collaborative, nationally, we should be unstoppable, and we will be unstoppable. This is something that should not be hidden as well. I feel like we have to get into these spaces with people who are potentially familiar with this kind of work for these things to be spotlighted. However, this is something that needs to be everywhere, and we want to serve as the blueprint. So we want this to not, what we're doing now, we've grown beautifully, but believe it or not, this is just the beginning, and we want to continue, and we want to get stronger, and we want to grow, and that's why we encourage you all, if you are able, if you know someone that is interested, to please join, because not only does it make our collaborative stronger, it makes us a blueprint, but it really does give the power back to the people who need it, who deserve it, who already have it, and just really need to fine tune and really need those opportunities. So being on the opposite side now, I really do call you to join us. Again, like Donna said, it was really important that you brought up, this is not something that you would be doing alone. We're not just gonna bring you in and throw you in a meeting and hope that you know how to start a YWI. We work with you every step of the way. I am directly involved in helping with programming. I work directly with our programming officers. We have a community of practice where you're all able to share some struggles, share any kind of questions that you have, and really those best practices. Believe it or not, a lot of the successes that we're seeing across the nation are coming from maybe one or two foundations that found their sweet spot, and they were able to share it with one another. So we really want to take this and grow, and you will have help. We have a wonderful guideline, a wonderful curriculum from Girls for Gender Equity, and then we also have some internal things as well. Again, we also want to create some more opportunities for our CEOs to get together, some more opportunities for the young women themselves to get together. We are currently working on a beautiful alumni network. You would be shocked to hear what some of the graduates from the YWI programs have gone on. You may have actually heard their names before and not realized that they got their start in a YWI program. And so we want to take that silence out of it. We want this to be everywhere because it needs to be everywhere. With that, we're going to have a few intro sessions. There is, first things first, there's an interest form. It is in the chat for this particular session on the app that you're all using. Hova or Hova, I believe it is. I'll put the link to the interest form in the chat. It is also on the WFN website, so you're able to access that. If you also look at the speakers, my information is there as well. If for some reason you have any issues, please reach out to me, and I can directly connect you to where you need to be. If you have questions about whether you fit, whether you're the right fit, what you need, don't worry about it. We've got you covered. So,
thank you, Cara. And I think we have time for a few questions. So are there any questions right now that we can answer for anyone about the Young Women's Initiative, or maybe you just want to hear more from Taylor, because I could listen to her all day.
I was going to say, I wouldn't mind hearing.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Destiny. I'm a senior at Howard University, and I'm a rock star with the Washington area. Thank you. My question is, how do you make sure that, like, your philanthropic efforts, well, of course, they're centered around communities who need it, you know, working with women of color, but there's also so many intersectionalities with women of color. So I'm wondering how you make sure that your efforts meet the people who need it the most.
Anna, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So because, you know, our primary competence is in philanthropy, right? Part of that competence is being connected with communities, what they're doing, and the ability to reach out to potential organizations. We do have values that we want grantee partners that are operating in community, and they come from our work with GGE, Girls for Gender Equity, and Joanne's leadership. Inclusion, cis, trans, non-binary. What we were talking about, a building kind of approach and a perspective of strength, right? Creating the environment, nothing wrong with people, but actually the environment where young women of color, cis, trans, etc., clients. So we wouldn't fund any organization. You know, the organization would have to express those values. And the organization would have to create that environment in which the charting, I mean, you heard that from Kara, you heard that from Natanja, the power of decision of what is relevant for that group of young women to do is defined by them. So we do those things in our choice of partnership, you know? And I just wanted to be very candid that we have learned. We have tried different partners, just wanted to say that, throughout the collaborative. And there are incredible, I mean, I learn every day as I did. This only exists for me because of Joanne and her leadership, as I said before. But that guide us and do that. But not every organization that works with youth development, even young women of color youth development, would be a partner here because these values and principles need to be there. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, it does.
I wonder if,
Congratulations on being a rock star.
Yeah, I just want to add to that a little bit. I think also part of being part of the collaborative is that we're not trying to hold up the status quo. In fact, I think we're all trying to figure out ways to disrupt philanthropy. And so Rockstar grants, quite frankly, right, they may not have been there if we were holding up the status quo. We would be looking at larger organizations, not individuals, right? I think that is part of what's embedded, and what we want to push our young people to also think about is like, who is getting funded? That is actually part of how we teach them about philanthropy, and who is it? And then where do we want our dollars to go? So I think that I just wanted to say that we're not here to do philanthropy in the way that mainstream philanthropy has done it. We are actually here to center and to support Black and brown communities.
Is there one more question? I think we have time for one more question, if there's one. And if not, I would love to have the panel just share 2 words of why you are participating in this program. And Taylor, do you want to start, or do you not want to be on the spot? We can start with Cara in case.
I can start. You said 2 words? Oh, I got a 3 word.
I'll give you 3. I'll give you 3.
Okay. Okay. Pour into me. That's 3 words.
Say that again for everyone.
Pour into me.
Ooh, I love that. Great.
Part of the reason that I'm here, look at how I'm looking, you know, is because someone poured into me. Someone seen the good in me, and that's what my organization is about, pouring in, because as a Black woman, we have to go together. One win is a win for us all. So, and even women in general, though, like, pour into each other. Someone poured into me, so it's only right that I go and I pour into my community, because we are so much better than what everyone thinks we are. I know personally, me, coming from where I come from, Southeast, I'm so much more than that. You know what I'm saying? I could stand in these rooms on this panel in my nice outfit and really be a game changer. So
That's awesome. Well, I don't know. I think, Taylor, you're hard to follow. So do any of you, the rest of you, want to pass, or does anybody have anything else? We're at 22 seconds. I feel like we should drop the mic with what you just said. But we're here to answer any questions, and Cara's details. She'd be happy to talk with any of you afterwards. Find us, join us, fund us, and there'll be more Taylors out in the world.
Right. Thank you.